Genesis chapter 37 marks the beginning of the last section of the book. It's a section that deals with the story of Jacob's son Joseph. Now, unfortunately, the habits and struggles and patterns that we've already seen in Jacob's family continue to just sort of bubble up to the surface. Things like favoritism, deception, and violence are endemic to this story. Yet, when viewed in its entirety, the story of Joseph not only advances the family of God, but it also gives us one of the clearest and most beautiful examples in the Bible of God's perfect sovereignty. The narrative of the chapter follows the young Joseph as he goes from a 17-year-old son wearing fine clothing that sort of proclaimed his favored familial status to being a slave in a foreign land, someone who is stripped of all dignity and freedom. As always, I would encourage you to read the chapter for yourself, and you can fill in the details, the plot lines, if you will. What I'd like to do, though, is briefly focus on the sort of final straw that infuriated Joseph's brothers. Now, the text tells us that Joseph, like his father, had two divinely inspired dreams. The first involved sheaves of grain, and the second included the solar system. But both just really pointed to the reality that in time, Joseph's family would bow in reverence before him. Now, understandably, this didn't actually sit well with the older brothers, who immediately began to scheme as to how to get rid of the dreamer. Joseph isn't alone. Mary and Peter and numerous other biblical characters were given a dream or a vision of their future. But what about us? Should we seek out these types of divine revelations? Well, dreams, it strikes me, are sort of a blessing and a curse. On a personal side, I've often wondered what God has in store for my life and how it would play out. I've often thought that it would be easier if God would just sort of show me a movie of my future self. But would it? Consider Joseph. He knew that his family would bow before him, but he didn't know the series of events that it would take to bring that about. Had he known all of the details, would he have been more faithful or less? It's like he knew the end of the story, but not the middle. Here's my point. Life is a journey of faith. By faith, Joseph grasped onto the truth that God had shown him. But he undoubtedly struggled to day live in that truth. What was more beneficial for Joseph is that it seems like he has a very high view of God's character, such that he lived by faith even when his life didn't make sense. The same must be true of us. We are not guaranteed to have a vision of our future, but we do have numerous promises from the Bible. Promises that God is good and sovereign and is even now working for His glory, is even now preparing an eternal home for us that is infinitely better than anything that we could dream or imagine. Living by faith means that we cling to these great and precious promises as we walk with God. It's far better to pursue Him than it is to chase visions or fortune tellers or would-be prophets of the future. So as we read the book of Genesis, and in particular this story of Joseph, we have a front row seat that just allows us to see God's character and power at work. May we grow in our faith and our understanding of God as we read.